All right, all right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, hello, and welcome to our uh, third running week of our weekly Animatron webinars. I hope you guys are liking them so far. I am your personal Animatron Guru, Bryce, and I'll be guiding you through today's topic of interest. So last week, we didn't really get any filters, any hits on any particular topics in favor. So I decided that we're going to be discussing um, a bit more about animation because it's something. Hold on. Sorry about that. I have a little feedback here. So we are going to be discussing path editing and keyframe easing with animation. So if anybody is particularly interested in how we animate inside of Animatron, this is probably one of the better demos to be viewing. So make sure you stay attentive throughout this. It should be nice, short, and sweet. If you're brand new to Animatron and completely unfamiliar with our software or any of the tools or functions in the program, I do ask that you visit our tutorials playlist on YouTube, and you can find that by going down to the description area underneath this broadcast screen here. So in the description area, click on that hyperlink. It'll take you to the playlist with all of our current official Animatron tutorials. And you will get a better understanding of the basic functionality, the tools, the terminology, where all of the menus and everything are. So that's usually a good thing to get embedded in your brain before you go in fully to animation using Animatron. So just go see those playlists and click through them. See what you can learn from them, and then you can always come back here to our webinar archive and see what I'm doing, and maybe you'll pick up something extra from that. For those of you with topic-related questions throughout this webinar, I do ask that you ask those throughout the entire event, throughout the demo. So that if anything relevant pops up as I am going through my demo, I can answer them on the spot. For anybody who has anything that's off topic that they'd like to ask me, I'll ask right now that you please save those questions until later on when we have our open Q&A session. And then you can really ask me anything at that point. So instead of sidetracking myself with questions that may not be relevant to keyframe animation or easing or path editing in general, please hold those questions off until the end. Otherwise, we can get right to it. So let me share my screen with you here. And there you go. You should see our landing page. Our Animatron landing page is up. All right. So like always, I'm going to start fresh. Again, if you're new, you don't really understand what you're seeing right here. The quickest way to start your very first Animatron project is go up to this sweet little button at the top right corner of our web page. It says Create Animation, and go ahead and click on that, and you'll see our editor load up in time. So a few things that I wanted to go over and that we really haven't gone in depth with our webinars yet is really the animation side of everything. Animation is very particular to each editing program or each animation program that you use. So it's very important to find out all of the ins and outs of how our timeline works, how the keyframes interact with our individual layers, and obviously how to edit the keyframes on our canvas along our timeline, and all the functionality therein. So what I'm going to do here is set our stage. I'm basically just going to drag and drop a couple of our animated sets here. For those of you who haven't been keeping up to date with our marketplace items, we do have a lot of new animated sets in our market. So literally just clicking on our little Market and Project Library tab down here at the bottom. This will bring you directly to the marketplace, and up at the top left, you'll see animated sets. And just click on that, and you can scroll through a genre of your choosing. We do have quite a bit of these, and they're all professionally done, so you'll see some really cute animations going on here. Some of them have animated backgrounds, a lot of characters, a lot of different art themes, art styles in here, so you can really dig into Animatron right away if you're not developing your own designs or animations from the beginning. This is a great place to start. So there was one in here. I believe we had one for Moonbase. Moonbase, there's Earth, Saturn, and Moon. One of these had a rocket, and I wanted to show you path editing with a rocket. Here we go. So under Earth, Saturn, and Moon, we have these interesting background images. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop one of the backgrounds on here. That's the view of Earth from the moonscape. And you can scrub through here. You'll see there's a little animated background. So I wanted to show you path editing. So one of the quickest ways to understand snap to path. One of the easiest ways to understand snap to path is if you have an object that you would like to move across the canvas here in a designated path that you've created, that you've hand drawn, you can have an object follow that path throughout the entire animation from the start of the path to the end of the path. So the first thing you're going to do when you're using the snap to path feature is actually draw the path that you'd like to create. And it doesn't matter if you use a brush or use a pencil, use the pen tool. They all technically work the same way. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to be using our pencil tool. I like to bring my smoothness up because it doesn't give me much. It smooths out the curves when you start to draw them. You'll see as I start to draw my lines here, with the smoothest value up, I can just click and drag. And I'm going to make a little parabola here, like a bouncing ball, and boom. And when I let go of that click, you'll see that my line has actually smoothed out. And that's why I like using smoothness with the pencil tool. So it gives me a good variety of bounces here if I wanted to do something that was bouncing along the lunar surface. So I wanted to grab a rocket originally. I ended up drawing a parabola, so we can think of something else. Here we go. We have our little astronaut here. So I'm just going to click and drag our astronaut onto the surface, just so we have him on our canvas. You'll see him added to our layers panel right here, astronaut walking. So what I can do is I want to be able to flip this guy horizontally so he's facing the right way. I'm going to start him from the left and move him to the right. So I just right-clicked on him with the context menu, go to Transform, and I clicked on Flip Horizontal. So it changed him from looking left to looking right. And this works better in our case because I want him to move along the surface. Okay, so we have the animation of our astronaut walking. You can see that as I scrub through here. And you'll see that the line that I drew, let me pull this out of its combined layer. So Pencil 1. Pencil 1 is the line that we've drawn. There's no animation on it yet. But what we're going to do is append it to the astronaut, and we're going to have the astronaut bounce across the lunar surface all the way to the end. So the first thing you're going to do is grab your pencil, the actual line that you've drawn. You can click it from the canvas. If you have too many things on your canvas, it's difficult to actually click on these pencil lines. You can just you can literally just select it from the layers panel, and then it will select that object for you. And then what I'm going to do is a Control-C or copy. And then what happens now is once I've copied it, if you're on a Mac computer, I should also hint the fact that on a Mac, you're using Command-C. I'm using a PC right now. Control-C works the same way. So once I've copied it, copied our pencil line that we've drawn here, we can append it to the character that we want to follow, or the character or object that we want to follow that path. And all we have to do is simply right-click on the object that we want to attach to the path. In this case, it's our astronaut. And I'll go down my context menu here until you see something that says Snap to Path. And here we go, right here, Control, Shift, and V, if you guys are interested in using your hotkeys. Snap to Path, you can click on that, and you'll see it lines itself up with the very beginning point of the pencil path that we've drawn. So now what I can do, just to see if the Snap to Path applied properly, I can scrub through my timeline, and you'll see my character bounce from one position to the next, following the line as accurately as possible, all the way to the end. Now, the advantage with having Snap to Path feature like this is that now I can really drag out my timeline. And if I wanted this whole animation to occur over a longer period of time, you'll see that it's placed a keyframe at the 10-second mark where the end of the path, or essentially where the end of the scene was. I moved my scene duration flag to 16 seconds. It was at 10 seconds, so it left a keyframe here for me to edit. So what I can do is grab this keyframe and drag it all the way to the end, and now I'm able to extend the amount of time that it takes for our astronaut to eventually get to the end here. This is probably pretty slow, so I'm going to hit Enter to give me a quick playback and see how fast this actually is moving. Oh, there we go. So it actually ended up turning out pretty good. So right now what we have is our astronaut bouncing along a Snap to Path line. And if you guys do not want to see this path line, the one that we drew originally, all you have to do is select the pencil layer itself, and you can either delete it or you can hide it. I prefer hiding it and locking it just so that I have it to refer to later in case I wanted to bring that that specific bounce back, or that specific path back. If you delete it, there's no real quick way of getting that pencil shape back unless you Control Z and undo all the way to when you had your pencil mark. You know, good habit to get into is, if you've drawn it, and even if it's something that you don't want, it doesn't hurt to save it for later. Just lock it, hide it from view, and you'll never have to see it or deal with it again, unless you need it. So, and then you can always, you know, push these to the bottom of your layer stack and, you know, forever be hidden underneath all of your useful layers. So now what we've done, we've hidden our line. I'm going to hit Enter again and see how fast this plays through. And so you'll notice our character is moving at a set speed. What I mean by this is the character is literally following the path that I drew from start to finish at the same exact rate of speed from beginning to end. So one of the things that we can do to change that is actually set our easing. But easing I'll get into after we start adding more keyframes throughout. It's more useful when you have very short segments of keyframes to work with. So I'm going to edit the path first, essentially edit the motion path that our astronaut now follows. So what I can do is select my astronaut. I'll just click on the layer. And you'll see now this little dashed line on our canvas shows you the exact same path line that we had drawn with the pencil tool. So this is a really good indicator that he already has motion on him. He has keyframed animation attached to this object. And what you can do is just click on this dashed line, and you'll see everything show up. You'll see the actual curves show up as if they were drawn objects, drawn shapes, using the pen tool, pencil tool. They all technically work the same exact way. Now, the one thing you'll notice is that there are nodes attached to this edited path line. Sorry, to this to this motion path. So they don't directly correlate to keyframes, though. So what you have to be wary of is when you use snap to path, you're not going to be able to generate new keyframes on your timeline unless you place them on your timeline first. So what I can do is, if I have a position here, the character is probably right at this this node point. What I can do is insert keyframe. I'll right-click on my time band for my astronaut, and I'll insert keyframe. And you can just hit the plus key if you're into the hotkey thing. Insert keyframe, and you'll see I'm presented with a new keyframe at the 2-second mark. Now what I can do is, as long as I'm on the 2-second mark, I can edit the position of wherever this character is in time. And you'll see that here, I'll drag them out so you can see how the motion path is actually being edited. So at this 2-second mark, he was continuing to follow this line until I reposition this new keyframe off of the path that we had drawn for him. So you'll recognize here that when I scrub through, he doesn't exactly follow this line how we would like him to. So that's something that you should be very cautious of, is if you're adding lots of keyframes throughout your time band and you already have a snap to path attached to this object, it's not going to be as easy as creating a keyframe and just placing him along, expecting him to follow the same path and maintain position, angle, rotation, all that stuff. But what I can do is I'll just remove this keyframe. Move keyframe. There we go. I guess another good thing to point out here is that because I've essentially broken the way that the path functions, I've added a new keyframe and repositioned the object. It is essentially resetting the path that he's attached to. So if I was to go ahead and delete that keyframe, so this is what I did before, inserted a keyframe. If I remove that from my translate line, what you can do here is, this is another good pointer. With animation, you see the time band. You're applying keyframes to the time band. But in Animatron, you're actually applying keyframes to the rotation, the scale, position, anything else that's really attached to this character. Essentially anything that you see in the object's inspector panel is going to be keyframed throughout your timeline. So far, all we've done is changed its translation with the snap to path. So if you hit this little box at the end of our layer, this little down arrow here, if I hover over it, says show tweens. So you can pick and choose the keyframes of each individual tween. In this case, we have one translate tween, and you can select those keyframes individually. So let's see if that breaks it too. Yeah, and it destroys the path that we've attached it to. So just so you know, if you end up adding your own keyframes along this snap to path, it is going to break the function of it later. So try not to improvise your own keyframes if you can try to control yourself on that end. Otherwise, what you can do is actually directly edit the path itself. So if you feel like this character is not in the correct position at that point in time, I can grab one of these nodes, one of these little white nodes. It's hard to see with the background on, so what I'll do is I'll hide our background. And you see these little white nodes. When you click on them, you can drag them out just like we do editing a pen curve or pen stroke. And you can play with the Bezier handles to get a more refined feeling as to how you want this arc to be. And as with the curve editing tools, you can always use a combination of Alt, Control, Shift, and Command in the case of a Mac computer to change the way these Bezier handles work. So I'll hold down Control and click on my Bezier handle, and now it has straightened it out. So now every time I affect this handle, the opposite handle follows. And if I hold down Control at the same time as I'm moving it, it does it uniformly, the in and out points of that node. So you can essentially directly edit this path however you feel comfortable doing. Again, click on your character, click on the path, and then you can start editing these path nodes. So that's repositioning them, the way that you want them to be moving. So what I'll do is I'll just click through each individual node here. There we go. And I'll just kind of flatten out each one of these in and out points so that it makes more sense as to what our astronaut is actually going through. So essentially changing the trajectory of where the astronaut is bouncing, how he's bouncing. But the problem with this is you can't add your easing into each bounce unless you set a keyframe for each of those bounces. So what you'd have to do is generally get to a point where you're happy. Let's say right there. He's at the very bottom of this curve, or of this particular bounce, the first bounce he does. And it's lined up with this node here. So what I can attempt to do is right-click on my time band, manually insert a keyframe as we did before. And what this opens up for us is the ability, the ability to ease between these two keyframes. And keyframe easing is essential to animating because it gives you a more lifelike feeling. And I'll give you an example of what easing actually looks like in case you've never heard the term before. It basically means you're easing, the animation eases from the very first keyframe that's affected into the full motion of the animation and then eases out. So it's like a soft in, soft out sort of feeling behind it. In order to get our easing attached to our keyframes, what you do is you right-click between two keyframes. All right, so right now I'm between our frame 0 keyframe and our almost frame 6 keyframe. And if you right-click between them, you'll see this blue line appear through the time band. But if you look on the other side of the time band where there is no keyframe attached to it, the easing isn't set to that. So it's basically showing you that you're easing these two keyframes from left to right. And at the very bottom of our context menu here is Set Easing. So what I'm going to do is click on Set Easing, and you are presented with a string of samples. If you hover over them, it gets you a bit more of an example of how the animation happens over time. So at 0 seconds to 6 seconds, it'll be a very slow process, speed up, and then soft in at the very end of the 6-second mark. In order to get a visual representation of what these are actually doing to your object, you can click on them. You'll see them highlighted when you left click, and it will actually show you an example on the canvas of how fast he leaves the very beginning keyframe and how he's affected over that period of time. It gets to the end, it's a soft in. This is our astronaut, so each one of his impacts is going to be relatively soft in nature, less gravity on the moon and whatnot. So this will give us a good idea of how our character is moving. I'll change it to cubic, and you'll see that the action is a bit more exaggerated, but probably more so that it looks unbelievable at this point. Sine is a really quick and soft way of having that in and out without it looking too mechanical. So you can either go with sine. Here, I'm going to go with quad. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of what each one of these actually does, because not a lot of people understand the expressions. So we have none. There is no easing on it. So if you ever need to remove or reset your easing, make sure you have the in point and the out point of your keyframe checked on, these little check boxes here. So you'll see the lines themselves change when you check these on and off. The very first one is none, so that's your way to reset any easing that you've applied previously. The next one out is quad, so quadratic, which means it's a more or less a soft, soft in and soft out. You have cubic, which is very soft at the beginning, speeds up in the middle, and very, very soft at the end. Sine, which is more or less a straightforward, we're changing a little bit of the acceleration of the animation in the center and some softening at the beginning and end. When I say the beginning and end, I mean, if you were to imagine this sine line here, from the left would be the 0 second mark, and at the right would be our 6 second mark where, basically this arc ends. So between 0 and 6 seconds, it'll be soft at the beginning, and then moving into our 6-second keyframe, it'll be soft out. And then the next one up is expo, or exponential. It's very quick. So you'll see in the curve itself, it's very soft to begin with, a very, very fast central motion between the two keyframes, and again, very, very soft ending. We have circle. Circle works pretty well for things that you want to have the feeling of them coming close to the camera and moving away from the camera. Imagine a ring or a circle in 3D. As it gets farther away from you, it's really, it appears slow or appears fast as it gets closer to you. So it's kind of a representation of a circle being swung around, or the object swinging around a circle, rather. And then we have back. Back just gives you like a hesitation, so it'll go to the point and a little past it. It's kind of an awkward one to use, so if you find a reason to use this, let me know. I've never actually had to use back for anything before, but it probably is very useful, given the situation. I just never had a real situation to use it for. You have bounce. Bounce is more or less a jitter. So if you have something that's a parabola, and you'll see this better off like a bouncing ball, something with some sort of gravitation to it. Because I have in and out checked on, you don't see the parabola. So what I can do is check out off, and you'll see how the bounce actually should look from start to finish. So it's very slow to start and very quick to end, as a parabola usually is. And then we have instant. So if I click on the out point again, we can take a look at instant. Instant is essentially it's essentially a stepped way to show your animation. I have a 3D background in animation, so stepped makes a lot of sense to me. If you're going to pre-visualize an animated figure, you want to present this to somebody as they can see it frame by frame. And you'll get the extreme positions of a character down. And this really makes more sense to 3D animators or 2D hand-drawn animators. You'll get the extreme poses drawn first. Generally they should be drawn first. This way that you can show instant, and you'll see instant is just I'm at the left-hand side, and then eventually he'll flip over to the right-hand side. The only reason he's still moving in between is because the object itself actually has animation in it. But it'll start at the very beginning and end at the very end. So instant is a really good way to get that stepped look. So for you hand animators out there, you should have some understanding of what I'm talking about with stepped keyframes. But for those of you who don't, generally not something used too often. Again, I'll go back to quadratic easing, and we'll get a good weightless moon bounce feeling here. And I'll go back, and what you'll see is I can't immediately see that these two keyframes have any easing applied to them unless I was to play back through my animation. I see that there's a little bit of easing in the rate that they animate from the in point and the out point. But what you can do is, again, with this little show tweens button, just click on that, and now our translate, it's very difficult to see here, but if I was to zoom here, let me zoom in maybe and check off of it. There you go. you'll see a slight gray line pass on this translate line. You'll see the slight gray line that gives you an idea of what kind of easing is applied to it, or if there even is easing applied to it. And all you'd have to do to check what kind it is, again, just right click between them, set easing, and you'll see it's already selected on. So I have a quad from the in point of my 0-second keyframe, and then to the out point at my 6-second keyframe, which is basically saying there's easing on the first keyframe, and there's also easing leading into the second keyframe. So that's a way to tell where your easing is applied between your keyframes. But if I was to do this throughout the entire bounce, I want to make sure that I have keyframes that I can actually apply them to. So what I'll do is I'll quickly add my keyframes as I go through, and you'll see the process. Again, right click, set easing, in and out checked on, go to quad, make sure that it's working, scrub through, make sure it's still appended on there. That's good. I'll get to my next bounce, boom. Keyframe here. Again, right click between the first and last keyframe that you want to ease. In and out are checked on, click on quad, go back, scrub through again, go to my next bounce. So you see, once you get into the habit of applying these keyframes and applying frames, it kind of becomes second nature after a while, especially after something like this with a bounce. You're doing essentially the same easing per bounce. And the only thing that might change in between is these trajectories of each bounce if you really wanted to be that picky about it. And I know most animators generally are very picky about where things happen and when they happen. So as I go through here, again, I'm still just setting easing from each bounce from the start to finish. And again, boom, 1, 2, yeah, and that's kind of not even noticeable at that point. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'll just add the easing at the end. Yeah, okay. So what I can do is, if we're looking at our keyframes, and you look at the translate feature here, or the translate time band itself, you can see that there's easing on between each one of these keyframes. Again, if you wanted to edit them directly or remove them completely, just right-click between them, set easing, and then you can just go to none. And this will remove all easing for that entire length of time. So that's set easing in a nutshell. We're at about 30 minutes here, so this is relatively quick information for you guys to pick up for animating your first character. Or animating your objects in general. What I'll do is I'll unhide my background here so we can get a nice little feeling for our environment. And what I'll do is I'll drag out this keyframe so that my background keeps up. So what we have is a nice 16-second animation. There you go. And what happens, guys, is over time, see how I'm working with so many assets, and most of these assets are moving. I get a lot of people that don't understand file sizes and how they affect your working environment. So let's say if you were inside of Illustrator, probably more so Photoshop, and you bring in the biggest possible image that you can to Photoshop, it's going to start lagging a bit on you. It doesn't matter if the processor is fast enough, if your computer is working fast enough for you. Since this whole application is online, you're going to find that it lags from time to time. So don't let that deter you. But what you should take from it is that every so often, just make sure that you refresh your browser window. And obviously, Animatron takes care of the whole business of saving move that you do. So every time I've added a easing to my keyframes, it's automatically saved for you. So everything's saved up to date. Before I do refresh it, I do want to give this a name. I'll just say astronaut bounce. And since it's automatically saved, usually get this little indicator here that says all changes are saved for you. It's green. which means I'm okay to refresh my browser and nothing is going to blow up on me. So I'll refresh just to get some of the speed back in my editing. And this is something that will affect your workflow. So you should probably get in the habit of making sure that you refresh every once in a while. And now you see I can scrub through my timeline, and I don't have that obvious apparent lag that I had before. So what I can do now is just test it. I want to make sure that my my snap to path motion path is still intact, that each one of the keyframes that I've added is not affecting the overall animation or taking away from anything, and obviously that the easing is working the way I intended it to. So I'll just hit enter. Now I'll take a look here. If I had some cool astronaut or sci-fi music in the background, this would really polish this little astronaut bounce off. There you go. Okay. So, I would go back through this if I was going to be very nitpicky, and, I'd just click on my character, click on the motion path, and then I'd go back into editing each one of these bounces so that they worked in my favor for how I actually see this character moving from bounce to bounce. So maybe this one gets a little bit more height. Maybe this one, it's a shorter distance. So you get the idea. You can change your path at any time, again, by clicking on it. Click on the object to see if there is any motion path on it. If you've snapped a path, it's not going to be readily apparent that there's animation attached to that object because over your time band, you won't see these keyframes in between. You'll just see the very first one and the very last one. If you were to, actually, before I step away from this, one of the things that is really good, a good way to quickly edit how this happens or how this animation takes place is I can scale it on my timeline. And this is something a lot of people don't even know that's there because it's hotkeys. So what I can do is right click on the very last keyframe of the animation. And the easiest way to tell that is if you look at your timeline here, if you look at the time band itself of astronaut, everything that I've animated up to the 16-second mark, you'll see in like this teal color. This baby bluish color means that there's animation attached to those keyframes. But afterwards, you'll see at the end here, in the gray region, nothing is happening. It's just standing still. It's not moving anywhere. So what I want to do before I scale my animation is right-click on that last keyframe, change end action, stop because I don't want it to be viewable anymore at a certain point. And what that does is it gives me an end frame handle, and you'll see this little, it looks like a blue handle here at the end with parallel, vertical lines. With this, I can hold down the shift key and drag the entire animation to the left or to the right. And you'll see that these keyframes maintain their distance from each other, but now I can scale the entire animation shorter so it happens faster, or I can scale it larger or longer, which makes it slower. It makes it happen slower over time. So that's something for you very particular animators, if you're not happy with the speed of something, that you can quickly do to change how fast things work. So what I can do is after I've just made that scaling change, I can play through again. Always get in the habit of playing back an animation to make sure it's working the way that you want it to. Right, so there's a lot of things that have changed with that scaling that may require you to reapply that particular snap to path. So that's another reason why you should hold on to that line drawing that you made earlier, is so that you can get this curve back, you can get this line back. And once you reapply it to your astronaut, you can make sure you put all these keyframes back in manually. But as long as you get the amount of time that it happens over first, you can reapply this pencil drawing as a snap to path, reapply it to your astronaut. You'll get those bounces back, and you'll have the proper timing that you were looking at before. So that is essentially the end of my little quick animation demo for you guys. So if you are interested in using snap to path, this is a great way to get immediate animation turnover. So if you're doing anything for a class project, or if you're doing some slideshow stuff, it's pretty simple. Just draw the line, select the line, copy it, right click on our character, and make sure you apply snap to path. Since I don't have a path selected right now or copied to my clipboard, I can't snap it to that path yet. So that's a really quick and gritty way of getting those animations done right away. Get back here so that this character actually has a bounce still in him. Let's see, what else can I get into with this? So the other thing with snap to path, and I'll just breeze over this real quick. I'm going to hide this. So I'll draw, a little S curve here, wherever it went under the background. And I'll go back to my marketplace, find my rocket ship. And this is what I was going to look at originally. But I think my astronaut kind of distracted me from allowing this to happen. I'll select my pencil line again, Control C to copy it, select my rocket, right click on it, snap to path. And now my rocket is snapped to this path. But if you look at how, when I scrub through this animation, it still stays vertical. There's no orientation change to it. So the quickest thing to do to make sure that this is oriented properly to the curve that you're making an object, like a flying object, follow, is orient to path. And you'll see that with my object selected, you look in your inspector panel here, and at the very bottom of the inspector is orient to path. And you can just check that on. If nothing happens right away, all you have to do is make sure you're at the very beginning of when the animation happens on that path, and orient it the way that you want it to be oriented. Oh, I take that back. I'll undo that keyframe. So what you could do essentially is rotate in design mode. This is another good point for you animators out there, or for the people trying to understand animation better, is we have this little switcher up at the very top. I should have started with this, but we have an animation tab and a design tab, and you can select either one. So the difference really is on animation tab, anything that you do at any point in time is keyframed on our time band. So anything that you move, anything that you change in our inspector panel, the rotation value, the scale of it, the skew, the opacity, everything is keyframed when you do it on that particular time that your playhead is on. If you want to avoid accidentally placing those keyframes on there without you knowing, switch over to design mode, right? We can think of this as our safety mode. And then you can reorient your object to follow that path. And now as it goes through the path, it's looking at it like it just started at that orientation, not that I keyframed it at frame 1. So that you can maintain this orientation throughout by just having design mode checked on. If I did it in animation mode and tried to, here, I'll just reorient it here. As you see, when I scrub through, it's going to look to try to correct to the very end keyframe. So here it's perfectly straight with the line, and at the beginning it's not straight with the line because it's keyframed. So again, go back to design mode, make sure that it stays at that point from start to finish, and when it gets to the end, it stays at that same point. And then that's your rocket. Let me hide my astronaut here. I'll show you my rocket. And hit enter. So now I have a cute little rocket animation starting from one point, ending at another. But with Orient to Path, you can force it to follow that path. You'll see because I because I played with design mode and animation mode separately, it keyframed the original orientation of this rocket. So, but you get the idea. You can orient your objects to those paths. And it's a really quick way to get those animations off the ground for you guys who are new to our program. And then we've gone over easing. Let's see. Editing our path. So path editing with our pencil tool. Make sure it's a good habit to get into locking. I always make sure that if there's no layers that I'm currently working on, that I lock them because it avoids me being able to actually click on it. So my background, I don't want to accidentally click and drag it off the screen or off the canvas. So just lock everything that you're not currently using, and then unlock the ones that you're trying to edit right away. It just makes everything a little bit smoother for you. And the pencils, the paths that we drew, I mean, you can keep these on the side, keep these at the bottom of your layer stack. You can group them together, save them to your project library. Go back to library, select my pencil, make sure that they're actually visible, and click this little plus symbol, and then now you have your motion path or your snap to path line saved to your project library. So any chance you get also, aside from locking your items on your layers panel, is whenever you get the chance, save it to your project library, because who knows when you'll ever need it again. And it saves that current version of it. So just like you're saving different iterations of a project, you can save different versions of this rocket, the size of it, the shape of it, the animation that's applied to it, the colors, everything that is part of that object at the time that you saved it to your library sticks that way or stays that way. So I am done with this demo. I'd like to ask you guys now, if you do have any questions, please ask them in our chat window, and I'll be happy to answer those as soon as possible. It looks like we are running good on time here, so I'll leave chat open for a while longer. But I just want to let you guys know that if you are interested in choosing a new topic, if you're not in animation right now, if you're not in working with audio right now, I'm just going over, the past webinars that we've covered. If you're not into creating custom shapes, if you have any particular topic on the tip of your tongue, you don't have enough information to make it understandable to you, shoot those suggestions my way, and then we'll custom tailor this webinar for next week to the topic that you guys choose. So if there's a number of topics that you guys have on your mind and there's a majority, I'm usually going to choose from the majority. But what you can do is go to feedback at animatron.com, send us an email here. Let me change that to white so you can see it. So you can go to feedback at animatron.com, send us an email there. Make sure that your header line or the title of your email says something about webinar. Hey man, really enjoyed the webinar. I have a topic to suggest for you. And then in your, in the body of your email, just make sure you let me know what topic it is that you'd like me to cover next week. And then I'll pull all those together, and then we'll resume with our next topic. Again, we are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. So please join me next time. Again, if you have any questions, throw those in chat right now. I'll be happy to answer them past our demo here. And I will catch up with you next week. Please join me, and we'll have a good time. And thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.